Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the second installment of Woman Crush Wednesday, part of the one-year anniversary celebration of Voice, Vision, Value, Black Women Leading Philanthropy. I'm Toya Randall, the curator and catalyst of this amazing platform celebrating and elevating the leadership impact of Black women. And tonight we have a power-packed panel, PPP, of Black women who over the course of the last year, found space and time and energy among all the things that were going on and coming undone in the world. These women created a new thing. They created things and organizations and institutions in furtherance of Black freedom and liberation, and they're going to talk about that together tonight. With our guest moderator, the Tanisha Harris. If you don't know her, you will come to know her in the next hour and why she is such a magnificent partner, sister, friend, and ally in the work. Tanisha will be leading the conversation with Carmen James Randolph, Sierra Coleman, and Rhonda Bryant. This multi-generational community of women are friends of mine. They have supported me and loved on me over the course of my career. And I am so grateful that you agreed to be part of tonight's experience. And with that, I'm gonna turn my camera off and sit back and take all of this in with the rest of you. I will turn it over to Tanisha. Thank y'all, see you later.
Thank you, Toya, and thank you for always creating spaces for us as Black women to be in, to show up and to love up on ourselves. We remain grateful to you. So folks know, and if you don't know, now you do, that I rely on my elders to say the words that sometimes my heart knows but can't find on my own. And so I'll just start us off with the great Toni Morrison, who said, when you find yourselves in places of power and trust, you must dream before you think. And I get the incredible privilege to share space and to have a conversation about Black women who have dreamt and then are thinking a whole lot. And so we're going to talk today about Black women and what it has meant for these incredible women you're going to hear from today. Sierra, happy birthday. Carmen and Rhonda in a conversation about the work that they started in the past 12 months. But before I jump in, and I'm going to have them each introduce themselves, I think it might be helpful to hear a little bit about who is Tanisha and the work that I've started. So I'll just name that. So among many things, and we all know that as Black women, we do many things. You can't give me one title. You can't give me one job. If we're being honest, I got a lot of jobs. And among them is I had the opportunity to launch with two dear sisters of mine, Hakima Abbas, based in West Africa, and Amina Doherty, based in the Caribbean. We got to launch the Black Feminist Fund, a global vehicle to support Black women's leadership everywhere Black women are organizing, are building, are moving. This has been a dream for the past 9 years. We have been thinking about it, planning it, plotting it, and decided to do it now. And so I start there with the deep humility and a conversation about Black women who dreamt up, did a thing, and the amount of courage it required to follow our dreams, especially when that dream was to stand in the gap for our people. And so we're gonna have a conversation with folks who have dreamt and started a thing during not the easiest time to be doing that, which makes them so incredible. And so I'm actually going to invite these incredible sisters now to share a bit about who they are and who you are. Like what is driving you, the thing you decided to start and why you started it. And so they'll each have 2 minutes. And I'm gonna ask folks if the chat box is enabled, then that's great. If not, no worries. But if it's enabled, we're gonna do a practice during our time together of loving up on Black women. Like, so if you hear something and you can't give the because we're not all together, or the yeah, girl, you said that, We want to hear you in the chat box, because one of the things that are when it means to start a thing that we often need is that affirmation, that love. And the one thing that Black women do really well is we know how to love on each other. So let's use the chat box to love on the incredible sisters that you're about to hear. If that's okay, let me see a few folks say okay in the chat box, and then we're gonna keep going. We're gonna test it out. I'm actually going to start with Carmen. Carmen, start us off. Tell us a bit about who you are, what'd you start, and why'd you start that thing?
So good evening. I am Carmen James Randolph. And who am I? Like you, Tanisha, I wear several hats. I have several jobs. I am a mom. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm a sister friend. I'm a wife. I'm a lover. And I am a passionate fighter for community. And I'm a dreamer. That's who I am. I actually wrote in my journal, I had a medical health issue over the last couple months, and part of my challenge was to come back home to myself. And I wrote out who I am at my core. So some of the things I just said are about who I am. I've had the privilege and the honor of working in this field of philanthropy for more than 23 years. And I came into this field as a young woman getting started, having worked in the nonprofit sector, having done work in public housing, working with mothers, working with children. And it was really the work that I did in community that always fueled who I was as a program officer, and then as I moved through the ranks in philanthropy, and grounded me. And what became clear to me, and I'm just going to be direct, it always troubled me, and no matter what spaces that I was in, that often it was people who did not look like the very people who we were trying to serve, who were making decisions about putting dollars in that community. One story I remember that just always stays in my mind, we were looking at a proposal from a group that this group served Black boys. And when they had to describe their outcomes, one of their outcomes was that they didn't lose a boy to death, to violence in the year. They saw that as a win. And I remember I was in this group of funders. I was the only one of us in the room, the only sister. And these people were saying, well, that's pretty gratuitous. You know, why would they say that? You know, and I had to just stop the meeting and say, have you ever even walked through this community? You would be too scared to park your car there, and to dare say that an outcome of not losing a child to violence is gratuitous. Who are we to say that? So I've had experience after experience, like many of you who've been in this field, where we know what it takes to carry the water, to carry the work, to get it funded, and to fight for dollars that are in the long run just pennies, to invest in the leaders. The questions we get about their capacity, about their wherewithal, about their finances, about their board, all the things that we have to fight to do. And in this moment, over the last couple of years, I said, I want to change this paradigm. I want to interrupt this field and create an enduring, permanent institution that would be an inheritance for women of color across the South, that we build with our collective power. It won't be some dead white donor that we are all working to live up to what this dead white donor aspired to be, but truly led by us, for us, and with us. So looking at what does power sharing mean, and how we create such an institution. What does it mean even to staff such a thing? When you're looking at, because I've had to hire staff members, and one in particular, very talented with several degrees, and to negotiate a salary that was so far beneath this person's value knowing that in all honesty, this person had a ton of student debt on his shoulders. And we shouldn't have to do all of that. We know what it takes to bring our talent, to bring our labor to the table. And we know what it takes to trust and believe in the people who are doing the work on the ground. So with that, I marshaled the energy of sisters and brought us together. And when you talked about dreaming, that's how this came about. We had dream sessions, and that's what we called them. We dreamed, what would this entity be? How can we center healing and justice and joy? How can we center connecting wellness with financial health? Because often we know as women, especially Black women, we live, if we're partnered with a man, often we're living longer than our counterparts. And our dollars, no matter if we're partnered with whomever, have to stretch. We're helping mama and them, cousin and them, aunt and them, whatever. We're putting people through school. We're helping parents. So we know that often our financial health is connected to our physical and our mental health. And it's also connected to how we lead, how we show up, how we embrace power in our communities. So with that, we have created the Women's Foundation of the South. And this has come through dreaming. It's come through partnership with women of color of many different walks, mostly Black women, but also Latinas and Muslims and mixed race. It's come with our trans sisters at the table, our queer sisters at the table, with a desire to be radically inclusive and build something that is for us. And I will say this started before the pandemic, and we were just about to get rolling. We had everything all planned, and then the pandemic hit, actually when we were doing a retreat. And I had to tell Mama Gladys Washington, I cannot ask you to get on a plane and come to New Orleans when we have our elders dying and the rates are skyrocketing here. And not that I lost hope, but it was just the scary moments. You just didn't know if we could go forward. And it was these sisters who about a year ago this time surprised me with so much love to say, this is an anointed vision and we must continue. And here we are.
Carmen, there's so much that you said. I'm going to hold it because it's going to leave, but I'm holding an inheritance. And I'm holding that you decided to come back home to yourself. Hold that for folk, because we're going to come back to that. I'm going to go to Sierra next to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you just started.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Sierra Coleman, and I consider myself to be a philanthropist, a change agent, an advocate for all things Black excellence, Black community, Black people, and especially Black women. I am currently the program manager at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, focusing on our work here in New Orleans. And I've been with the Kellogg Foundation for nearly 10 years and have worked on various portfolios within the foundation. And I must say that I have learned a tremendous amount about institutional philanthropy and how it operates, the gaps, best practices, the challenges, all of the things. And those experiences have really helped me to develop my own framework of how I want to not only show up in the work, but also the values that truly matter to me. And because of this, I operate on what I call an inside out framework or both and framework. And for me, that means, being very privileged and honored to be in institutional philanthropy, but knowing that my role there is to inspire, influence, and disrupt. But I also see the value of creating my own outside of institutional philanthropy because of some of those challenges and gaps that I've seen over the years. And that is really what led me to found Go Girl Giving. And I stand here not just as Sierra here alone, but really bringing in all the women of Go Girl Giving that believed in this crazy vision I had to form a Black-led giving circle that is ran by Black women, that supports Black women and Black girls. And Go Girl Giving is actually a larger initiative, is an initiative of a larger platform that I created called the Purposeful Project, which is all around inspiring, cultivating, and activating a spirit of giving amongst change agents and aspiring philanthropists. And so, you know, Go Girl Giving was not only birthed out of the necessity, because we all know that nonprofit organizations that focus on Black women and girls and are ran by Black women get pennies on the dollar. And so this was really about being able to pour into other Black women as they have poured into me. This has been about shifting the narrative to show that you don't have to be wealthy, you don't have to necessarily be a white man or even a white woman to consider yourself a philanthropist, but that your giving comes through your time, talent, and treasure, something that is so dear to Black people in our Black community and how we show up as givers. But it was also just for me personally and selfishly legacy building, right? I stand on the shoulders of many women, especially my late grandmother, Bobby Jackson, who was my first example of philanthropy in action, and how she moved about this world in a spirit of love is how it really was the impetus of Go Girl Giving, right? Was to do this out of love for Black women, do this out of love for Black girls, do this out of love for our community. And so this is also just legacy building for me. So when I'm gone, that hopefully this exists in perpetuity as a multi-million-dollar fund that gives, that funds the dreams and aspirations of Black women and girls with no strings attached.
Okay, birthday. Okay. Thank you for everything that you named. And I hope folks are seeing a thread. We are tied together and y'all are just showing the thread in real life. And the fact that we talked about inheritance and you're talking about legacy and you're bringing back, you're lifting up your grandmother. You made me think of mine, who was my first version of someone who was a philanthropist. If folks are so moved in our audience, lift up your grandmas, do it in the chat box if they're the ones that got you here. Let's say their names. I'm going to go to Rhonda next.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Rhonda Soyafat Bryant. And, you know, when I think about who am I, so much of why I do the work that I do is tied to the fact that I'm a Black mama. That's where I start with it, you know. And long before I actually birthed my own children, I've always felt a burden and a heart and a love for our children and wanting to make sure that they thrive and that they have everything and every opportunity that they need to thrive. And that has always been just center to my character and who I am and what I wanted to be for the world. So that's been my work for 25 years or so. I started my consulting firm, the Mariah Group, about 6.5 years ago. And our commitment was we were going to change the future for children. That is what we wanted to do, and in particular for Black children. This past year, we actually started the Nafasi Fund, which is a fiscal sponsor organization specifically focused on ensuring that Black-led organizations have access to the opportunity, the capacity, and the space that they need for their organizations to really become strong and independent, and also space for them to be able to heal and to rest and to have rejuvenation, because both of those things are so critical to our organization's success. And, you know, I was driven to do this. It started with Toya, to be honest. She called Bomani Johnson, who's on our team, and they had a conversation. And, you know, they say where 2 or 3 are gathered, the Spirit's in the midst. And so he and I had a conversation, and we had just come out of our own fiscal sponsor search. And in that process, I learned several things, because I'd never really paid attention to that field before, that aspect of philanthropy. But we know that so many of our Black organizations are tied to fiscal sponsor relationships. And those are dollars that are lost because they are taken from the organization to pay for a service. That's less resources that end up going into our communities. And as I began to look at the way fiscal sponsors operated, there were so many things that just angered me. And I said, there has to be a different way. So we interviewed several organizations. We looked at so many different people, and we ended up selecting an entity that was closest to what we needed, but nobody gave us everything that we needed. And I began to understand that first, fiscal sponsors are able to reject your application for sponsorship based on if you are not mission aligned. So if you say, my work is to disrupt white supremacy, and an organization says, well, we don't want to do work with you, we're going to decline your application. So what you're not going to do is tell me to tiptoe around my mission and then ask me to pay you to help me. Like, that's not the game that we're going to play. So we need fiscal sponsors that actually are not going to make our organizations apologize or tiptoe around what it is they are really looking to do for their communities. The other thing that I realized is that so many fiscal sponsors view this as a permanent relationship. And when you look at it, the vast majority of organizations that do fiscal sponsorship work will tell you that less than a quarter of who they work with actually becomes their own independent 501c3s later. And so I'm thinking, like, shouldn't it be our work and our job and our charge to help our Black organizations to be able to stand on their own 2 feet with their own 501c3, with their infrastructure intact? Because how many times in philanthropy do we see in a grant review process the excuse of they're less than capable of receiving these resources right now? So we need spaces where we view it as a temporary relationship, where we work with you to give you the things that you need to stand up and be strong in your community to do the work that you need to do. That has been my focus. That was the reason why we started it, because there have been so many instances of our organizations losing out on dollars and losing out on opportunities to be successful because the partnerships are not fruitful for them. And so we just need a different way. We need a different way for us and for our organizations. And I feel like if I've got the knowledge, if my team has got the knowledge, then we need to be giving it to our Black organizations. Because if we can help them win, we all win and all of our communities win.
Rhonda, for sure. Like the way the philanthropic sector, the space in which we're all in, continues to harm our folks and use as an explanation to under-resource our folks is infrastructure. And it is how they legitimize not acknowledging our full leadership. And so being able to respond to that with a vehicle that is going to be able to support folks in that way is stepping into the gap. Y'all, okay, so now y'all know who they are. We're gonna get a little deeper because I'm moved by spirit right now. I feel moved. So I'm gonna ask a question. But so the question I have for you all is connected to something that Carmen said earlier around coming back home to yourself. One of the things I've struggled with in this sector, in the philanthropic sector, and in white dominant spaces, when I'm trying to resource my people, when I'm in the practice of what feels like legitimize the humanity of Black folks in order to get a grant, that process feels like running away from myself. And I recognize and acknowledge that oftentimes we have to do that in order to move the resources. But I felt distance from myself in this sector just to do what I came there to do. And one of the things I'm sitting with in this space of dreaming was more than my sense of values, oftentimes what was lost. So I have to run back to my sense of deep, profound, my value and self-worth. Is that oftentimes what we're also running away is from our ability to believe in our wildest dreams and then jump. And so you all decided to jump, and you ran to yourself and jumped and started a thing. I am curious if you all can share, because I think something is telling me somebody needs to hear today. What was it that helped you keep running to yourself to dream that thing and decide that you and this dream was worth it? And then what do you do or get or have that keeps you going? And I want you to give me 2 minutes on this. So give me a few breaths on this. And I'm gonna start with Sierra.
I really appreciate that question. I think for me, it was the revelation to stop waiting on someone else to do the thing, right? Like always looking for someone else for me to support and help and pour into someone else's thing. I think that's what led me to jump. I had been a part of a giving circle here in New Orleans. And had a really great experience, but knew that I wanted to create a space for Black women. So again, like I was attaching myself to someone else's thing. I had, did my research and exploration on starting a fund at a foundation. That necessarily didn't work out as well. And so I had instances where I felt like, actually, now that I look back at it, I think it was just signs to like do it myself, where I was too busy like trying to do someone else's thing and not do my own. And so I'm also an APFE fellow and just wrapped up the APFE fellowship. And folks, if you don't know who the Association of Black Foundation Executives is, please attach yourself to that organization. They have tremendously poured into me, and I will forever be grateful to them for that. And I was, talking to one of my fellows, and he's out of Baltimore Collectively, is his organization. And we were just having a conversation, and it just hit me. And I'm like, I need to stop letting perfectionism get in my way of like having it all planned and took all the I's crossed, all the T's dotted. And yes, that is important, right? I want to move in excellence, but I also know that perfectionism can be a pause. It can be paralysis for me personally. And that conversation that I had with my colleague was just really inspiring. And again, just doing that reflection of looking back and saying, I always wanted to do someone else's thing. Like, it's time for me to just jump. And I think what affirmed me in that moment is when I started reaching out to the inaugural women for the Giving Circle, and immediately every one of them said yes, without a doubt. And I think that that's the power of Black women. That's the power of collectiveness and community. And I think at that moment I knew like this is just the beginning. And I'm just really excited about what's to come. But yeah, I think for me, it was just stop looking for other folks to do what God has placed in you to do.
Thank you, Sarah. Rhonda, what gave it for you?
So, for me, the first time that I really had this feeling of like running back to myself was actually when I started the consulting firm 6.5 years ago that the Nafasi Fund's now an outgrowth of. I was working in a white-led policy advocacy space and exhausted, and exhausted for what? Because I'm fighting both for the issues of our people, but also fighting within the organization to be heard and legitimized, and for people to understand, my ways of approaching the work, my ways of centering Black voices as a part of policy advocacy, and having to continually push for that in a space that didn't appreciate it. And so I found myself physically and emotionally drained. And I remember it was a pivotal moment. I had come down to Alabama to visit family. And I sat outside on my cousin's porch and just took in the sounds of nature and felt the rest in my body from that trip. And I said, you know what? I want something different for myself and for my family. You know, my family is watching me run 2 hours each way, commuting into DC to fight with white folks to say that Black people are legitimized, you know? And they are getting less of me, and I'm not satisfied and feeling fulfilled in my work. So, what is the vision for what I want to create for myself and for my family? And let's do it. And so it was very much, you know, like, can my kids get more of me? Can my partner get more of me? And can I feel like I'm actually achieving that best thing for my people? And so that's why I did it. And so every day I get to wake up now and work with people who believe the same. Because if you don't believe the same, you can't work here, honestly. Like that's just what it is. And every day, even when it gets hard, because you know, when you're starting something and building it from the ground, there are lots of hard lessons to be learned, lots of bumps in the road, and days when you feel like, you know what, I can quit this and go back to that thing that I did before where I can get a steady check. But at the end of the day, it does not fulfill my vision for what I want to be for our people.
Mm.
And so that's what kept me going. You know, like in the days when the payroll wasn't working and all that, I guess what kept me going. And that's why I'll continue to do the work, because I want both my family and my people to get more of me.
Mm. Carmen, take us home on this question of why you decided to run back home to yourself.
This is so beautiful. I'm so inspired, and I'm getting so much from each of you. I just have to say that. And I can say that you know, having a vision, having a dream, having a hope to do a thing is something. But in terms of what propelled me to keep going, I talked about the power of the women who came together, who dreamed with me, who plotted and planned. And just, I mean, we have carefully poured into this to build it very carefully and strategically. That's been a constant thread to this story. But for me personally, another part of the thread of the story, I could say amen and double everything that you, Rhonda, have said, and you, Sierra, but I'm going to also just talk about the water I've been in has been troubled. And on one hand, I have to have a spirit of gratitude and thank the Creator for putting me in a place where the water was troubled, because it's been in that trouble that I haven't been comfortable. And when you're not comfortable, you are going to be propelled to do something to change it if you have some sense, right? So the more I tried to be in a place where my values were not aligned, where every single piece was a struggle, the more, and I'm talking about especially over this last 18 months, being in a posture of dukes up every day, fighting to make sure that different pieces and work were on. I'm talking about big fights and small fights. Like, why won't you fund this group? What is the issue? Well, power is in their name. They serve Black people, and power being a part of their name was something that was a block. And I thank God for the folks who created spaces for us to come together and talk about these things, because I was just, you know, thinking this was just some real crazy whack stuff that I was dealing with. And then talking to other folks who were working in these spaces and learning that there are trigger words for, you know, white folks, and power is one of them. I'm like, what? So just being in spaces where my spirit was troubled, where constantly fighting, and honestly, the toll on that took such a toll on my body. And I'm just going to be honest. And I didn't even see it coming. I did not see it coming. I worked through the pain that was going on in my body, and to the point where it was normalized. And that's something I've also learned, that as Black women, too often we normalize pain. We normalize it, and we keep pushing till the point that I needed surgery. And I thought this was just such a little routine thing. Told my husband he could come stay afterwards, drop me off at home and go on to work. When they talked about how I needed to be observed and this and that, we both looked at each other like, what were we thinking? I mean, I had to come full stop. Not even surgery was enough to shake me to the point that I had to be confronted with, girl, you come into a full stop, a hard stop. So for me, that coming home to myself, I just have to be honest with you and tell you what my doctor, who I thank God for her, is a Black woman who said to me, God has sat you down. And he sat you down for a reason. If you aspire to do work that centers the health and wellness and healing of women of color, you have to know what it is to come to a full stop. You have to know what it is to prioritize your health, your wellness, and your well-being first, to do the work that you seek to do. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. When we started the Women's Foundation of the South, that was not on my radar. Not through any of the fundraising that we did, nothing. It was not on my radar, but I had to come to that place. And coming to that place of a full stop, where I've had to come to terms with what it means to prioritize my health, my well-being over the fight for this grant or XYZ nonprofit getting boom, 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 instituting this program up, putting up an equity fund in 3 weeks to make this funder feel that all that, full stop. And it's that. I would say it was troubled water, and the toll that it took, it cost me physically, and coming to a full stop. And through that process, I am so grateful that I have had the opportunity to reconnect with my body, to find my yoga mat, to find place and space for meditation and journaling. And I will last say this, I ran out of room in my journal that I was writing in before my surgery. And I went to my bookcase, as I said, I know I have some journals in here that I started and I never really finished. So I opened this journal, and the date of the first entry was October 2016. And it was when I first wrote out my vision of changing the paradigm for women of color. And I did that at the APFI Women's Retreat. And so back to APFI, back to Eva, who has been such a mentor and supporter to many of us. And I mean, to open to that page where I wrote out what I thought my legacy vision would be right after my surgery, it was like, okay.
I'm going to ask everyone to take a collective breath, even if I can't see you. This is accountability. Just take a breath, breathe all of that in, and the generosity of what these three incredible women have just shared really generously. I'm going to ask folks, we have a few more minutes. I'm going to have one question. I'm going to ask folks to share a quick reflection on this for a not so quick question. And then put your questions in the chat box. And then I'm going to ask your questions to Sierra, Carmen, and Rhonda. I'm sitting with what you just said, Carmen, and what everyone just said, and this kind of running back home to yourself. The work, we are in the business, whether we describe it like that in mixed company or not, of truly freeing our people so they can live out, we can live out in all the crevices of our humanity. And this idea of running towards or working towards Black freedom while killing ourselves along the way. or caging ourselves along the way is often what we're trained to do, and that's actually not freedom. So I'm curious, because I've been sitting with, how do I practice freedom on the way to on the way to being of service in the work of freeing my people? Which means I have to acknowledge that I am deeply worthy and I actually deserve to live and feel as much freedom as possible. So I'm curious how you, in a quick breath, how you, this new work you have just started, because one thing we know how to do is put new things on our table talking about we want to be good. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I want to be good, I need a break, but let me do this other job, you know? So how do you practice freedom so that this new body of work that you have started is restorative and pours back into you and is not led in a way that continues to just be another thing that just takes so much? So how are you shaping leading in a way that is different and loving up on yourself as a leader? I'm going to start with you, Carmen. Give us a breath on this.
Quickly, I can say that these values have been grounded in every single part of the organization. So they are infused in our personnel policies. They are infused in how much we're investing in retirement and benefits and what have you. And that was the conversation. How do we live these values? Not we recognize that these are challenges in the field and we're just going to recreate them, but how do we start to change that now in building this institution? And asking myself the hard questions of how do I model as a leader what we need to see in terms of health and wellness being centered in how I approach the work. So this is the daily walk. This is the challenge of, okay, if our personnel policies say there is an end to the work day, there is an end to the work day. I'm not going to text you. I'm not going to email you. It's not that urgent. We're not out here. We are freedom fighters, yes, but we are not fighting burning buildings or putting traits in people. This will hold until tomorrow. So it's modeling that work, but more importantly, it's making sure that these values are infused in every single part of the organization, not only what we're doing externally. And to say to a funder, I need time. I need you to, if you really want to invest in us, give us the dollars so that we can bring together our sister leaders from across the South and build what they need based on what they tell us. Not what I say or you say, but what they tell us they need and what's going to best support them. So it's modeling that in how we do our work externally, but most importantly, how we are internally.
Love it. Rhonda.
So definitely echoing what Carmen said about it being infused in the values of the organization and the ways that we treat our people is a part of it for us. For me, it has been holding myself accountable to the way that I manage my schedule and the amount of hours that I work and the ways that I work. And having an assistant who, once I said to her, this is what I really want my life to look like, who is unyielding and will hold me accountable to that. She's like, no, you can't work that 900th hour this week and schedule that meeting. That's not going to happen. I took a sabbatical for the first time ever in 25 years of working because I just needed to rest and think and reconnect spiritually. And now that I've done that, I'm committing to do that for myself every year and taking that time.
Sierra.
You know, in all honesty, this is something that I have been struggling with for quite some time, and I don't have it figured out. But I am so fortunate, and this is again going back to AbbVie, but to have Eva, who is my executive coach. And honestly, Eva has helped me to name the things that I didn't even have the words for. And one of my revelations last year, which came from a colleague, Tasleem, shout out to her, she told me that exhaustion is the thief of empathy. And that sat with me. And I realized that all of last year, and I can even point to some moments this year where I have just been so exhausted, where I have not giving grace and empathy to myself or to others. And that goes against my values when I'm exhausted and not able to show up in love. And so for me, it's always going back to the values. It's having that accountability. And for me, that's in the form of my executive coach, Eva. But it's also wanting to model, even though I don't have it right, but trying to model what I want for other Black women. I often tell my teammates, and I'm on a team of wonderful Black women at the Kellogg Foundation, like, look, you have to model it, because you all are in positions that I eventually want. And if I see you working and sending emails at 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 a.m. in the morning, as they say in the country, then it ingrains in me that I have to do that to get there. And, it's not healthy, right? And so, I just recognizing that some of these behaviors that we have are just not healthy. And, as we talked about prior to getting on the call and going live, like the relationship that I have to work, reevaluating what that looks like. So for me, I'm unlearning a lot and trying to learn new norms, new behaviors, and new ways of being.
Say that. What was said about rest and sit and dance, stillness, and our relationship to work in this country, Black women and our relationship to work, producing labor is so profound that it makes rest the most radical act of all.
Yes.
There are so many good questions, and because of time, I'm going to ask one person to ask a question. So I'm gonna let you all know who's going to answer this question. This question is, what vulnerability did you have to confront about yourself to become free? What vulnerability did you have to confront about yourself to become free? I'm going to give this question to Carmen.
Well, I can say that as a leader, going back to Eva, my DISC assessment says I see my success through other people. And when I met Eva for the first time in 2016, she asked me, "Why are you hiding?" And I've had to confront that question quite a bit. And if I was in fact hiding, and why was I hiding? And how I needed to not only see my success through other people, because I'm very serious about leadership development, and I've developed many leaders around me, but how I center my own leadership and come forward with my own voice. That is the piece that and to even say this publicly in this setting is quite a bit, but that's the vulnerability that I've had to confront over the last couple of years to do this.
Carmen, thank you for that, for so many reasons. Rhonda, so there's a question around how do we help staff and other folks around us build wealth without contributing to an extractive capitalism, without contributing to an economy that we know has a history of really harming our people, but acknowledging that we have to be able to have resources for generations in order to survive in this economy. Yeah. How do you think about that question?
So one of the things that I recognized was that in a lot of institutions, nobody explains how retirement policies work. They don't explain how wealth building works, et cetera. They just say, here go your 401k, drop money in it if you want. And so a part of what we actually do is we work with financial educators, and that is a benefit to our staff that they don't pay for. So they get to learn about forecasting for retirement. They get to learn about what are the tax vehicles that they should be taking advantage of to put money away for their children or to plan for future purchases, et cetera. And we provide all of that and have really meaningful conversations together about our relationships with money as Black people. And so we have those conversations as a team, and we can get vulnerable with one another and say, you know, I didn't learn to save till this or that. And so we learn from each other in that way. And that is an aspect of our organization. And I think we have to become, we have to be frank and real with each other about what we don't know, so that we can put the vehicles in place to educate each other in love and to make sure that we're just learning the best options and opportunities that are out there that most folks don't want us to know.
Rhonda, you better say that about our relationship to money. And some of us, we are in a sector about money. Our relationship to money, whew.
Yeah.
That's a whole other webinar. Okay. So Sierra, I'm going to ask you this question. So we have Kate, thank you for your question. So we have someone who's working in policy advocacy now, thinking about pivoting to a foundation or to philanthropy. Any advice that you have? This is someone who's thinking about starting something, but wants a little experience in the sector first. What advice would you give that person thinking about entering into philanthropy?
That's a really great question. I think that my word of advice would be to have your North Star. No, because we all know how philanthropy was started. And so it's really important to have a goal in mind when you enter the sector, whether that, you know what, I really want to be able to change a policy internally, or I want to, if I can get $2 million to community, like that's my thing. I think it's important to have a North Star in this work, because you can get swallowed up by so much that happens in institutional philanthropy, and you can easily get your eye taken off of the prize. And I think it also helps you to be yourself, be your most authentic self, and stay true to yourself when you know what you're in philanthropy for and what you're working for. Elva, she has this really great saying that, you know, in philanthropy, certain philanthropy, you can't necessarily go in, disrupt, you have to go in and influence, because it's like an organism. And if you try to disrupt the organism, it will do anything it can to survive. And so know that you are pushing up against, a lot of the times, against this organism that is steeped in white supremacy culture, right? And so it's just, I think, just having your why, having your North Star, and, you know, keeping your eye on the prize and know why you're there.
Next, do we need this panel to be 2 hours, y'all? So we've got a few minutes, and I'm going to ask you all in 30 seconds. Tell me, what is your wildest dream for Black women? And and I want you to take a beat and think about it. When you tell us what your wildest dreams are for Black women, do not leave yourself out. Center Rhonda, Sierra, and Carmen. So when I'm dreaming for Black women, I'm dreaming for Tanisha too. It ain't separate, because that's what Black women do. We dream for everybody else, but then who is dreaming for us? Because we are all, you already know. So whoever is moved to go, please go. But give me 30 seconds of what is your wildest dream?
I'm going back up purpose. I'm like, oh, is this really a wildish dream? But in today's society, I guess so. But I would like Black women to get their flowers and their coins while they're alive. Like, we know how to, as they say in the country, you know, get blood out of a turnip, make $1 out of 15 cents, and we get the work done regardless. But I would love to see Black women fully funded, fully financed to do the work that they're doing and the work that they need to do for community.
Carmen, what's your wildest dream?
I am 150% with Sierra. I think what we managed to do with one arm tied behind our back, my wildest dream is that we are free. Our hands are free, our arms are free, our legs are free, our feet are free, and we are fully financed and resourced to realize and manifest our dreams and our destiny for ourselves, for our loved ones, and for our daughters.
Rhonda, your wildest dream?
You know, I have this image in my mind of sitting on the porch in a rocking chair and being like, y'all, the village is good. That's what I feel, you know, that's what I see. And that's my hope, you know, that we get to the place where we don't have to work so hard because the work is done and the village is good and the children are safe and you know, Black folk are thriving.
Oh, my wildest dream is I get to spend time with straight up Black women all day and ain't nobody else bother me. I am so honored to have been able to share space with the three of you. Toya, thank you again for creating this container for us. I want to leave us with what we talked about is to dare to dream that our visions and wildest hopes for ourselves and for our people, for our lives, for our families, and for generations to come, to believe that that is worthy is coming back home to ourselves. And I invite you all to do what exactly our panelists invited me to do today, is run home. We'll close soon in the words of Toni Morrison, because we started with Toni and we should end with Toni. And I will just say, in the words of Toni Morrison, to folk on this call and to the Black women who just graced us today, you are your best thing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tanisha.
Thank you.
Thank you.